There are moments that arrive like a hard punctuation mark, one tiny action that forces the entire sentence of a game to be reread.
Timeout, Utah. 5.2 seconds left. Michael Jordan.
June 14th, 1998. Delta Center, Salt Lake City. The scoreboard is a whisper. Bulls 85, Jazz 86, then Bulls 87, Jazz 86. The ball leaves a man who has been practicing that release since before most of the crowd were born. It drops. The arena exhales like a city, 5.2 seconds on the clock. That jumper is the kind of hinge you build an entire career around. It is both proof and promise at once. This is the story of that shot, the man who hit it, the team that made it possible, and why one small frame became the place everyone points when they want to explain what a champion looks like. Start with the present and then rewind, because memory insists on context. The television cameras catch the release, a compact textbook 20-footer. But the shot works only because 16 earlier minutes of that game braided into it. The steals, the missed threes, the team foul, the way Scottie Pippen was hobbled and guarding pain as much as opponents. Michael Jordan took 35 of the Bulls' 67 shots that night and finished with 45 points in 44 minutes. He had just ripped the ball from Karl Malone in the low post less than 20 seconds earlier and turned a defensive theft into an offensive punctuation. Those micro choices, the steal, the sprint, the controlled dribble, the crossover, are the real story beneath the highlight loop. Leave the myth-making for a second and look at the ledger. Chicago led the league at 62-20 that season. Utah matched them at 62-20, and the two teams met in the finals for the second straight year. Game 6, June 14th, 1998, was the last negotiation in a long contract between legacy and challenge. The Bulls won 87-86, and with that final bucket, Jordan and coach Phil Jackson closed a chapter, Jordan's 6th title, and at the time what looked like the final curtain for the Bulls dynasty. The basic facts anchor the drama. The shot came with 5.2 seconds left. Jordan scored 45 that night. The Bulls held on after John Stockton's last attempt missed. Those facts are not just numbers. They are the scaffolding on which a narrative of closure, mastery, and finality hangs. But how did a single man come to own that moment? Start earlier in the year and even earlier in practice. Jordan's game was never merely talent, it was ritual. He lived repetition. He was the man who turned the impossible into routine by doing the small things others called boring. Untimed free throw lines, the same fadeaway mechanics over and over, the shot preparation that made a defender's contest look ornamental. By 1998, Jordan had already woven an entire vocabulary of clutch. The way he spaced his feet off the dribble, how he shaped contact into separation, the compact release that denied defenders a clean block. That small technical list, shoulder alignment, hip torque, off-foot balance, is the true grammar of the last shot. It isn't mystical, it's precise, practiced physics. Now rewind to Game 5 the night before. Jordan had to overcome a near disaster. In Game 5, he missed a potential winning 3 at the buzzer, a miss that allowed the Jazz to stave off elimination and return to Salt Lake City for Game 6. The miss was a narrative wrinkle, a reminder that even the great can stumble. It also hardened Jordan. Champions often use failure as a grinding stone. The morning after Game 5, the Bulls didn't rewrite their plays, they polished execution. Game 6 was the field test of that response. When Jordan skinned Malone in the low post and took the ball, it was not desperation, it was opportunity. That steal at 18.9 seconds, the strip of Malone, the quick sprint, then the pull-up, is as crucial as the shot itself because it framed the final possession, defense becoming offense with surgical speed. Let's look at the actual possession as if it were a motion study. Utah inbounds after a timeout. Stockton passes to Malone in the post. Jordan moves into Malone, reads the ball, and when Malone's focus is momentarily occupied with receiving, Jordan seizes and strips. A play that speaks to instincts, timing, and effort more than pure athleticism. He dribbles up the floor with purpose. Byron Russell is on him. Russell a scrappy defender, but not one with Jordan's history of late-game triumphs. Jordan attacks the lane not with flamboyance, but with arithmetic, a quick crossover to create a micro-inch, a plant that unweights his body, and a controlled elevation. The release is a 20-foot jumper, not a heave, not a prayer. In film rooms, coaches will freeze that frame and show you how Jordan's torso faced square, how his shoulder rotated, how his elbow pointed toward the rim. It's coaching gold, the geometry of a shot that had to survive the loudest noise in the building. This is also the moment critics love to question, and that controversy adds fuel to its mythology. Did Jordan push off Byron Russell? Some players, including John Stockton, later suggested there was a push. Russell and others have insisted he was simply beaten by a superior move. Replays show a subtle separation that could be read either way, a push-off to some viewers, a legal separation to others.
Now everybody say I pushed off. Bullshit. His energy was going that way. I didn't have to push him that way.
Russell was already stumbling away.
The conversation doesn't reduce the shot's power, it sharpens it. Every legendary moment sits in the gaze of debate. If the movement was marginally illegal, it's still the artifact of a player who had learned how to tip the balance of a human contest by an inch or two. In sport, margins are moral and mechanical at once. But the shot cannot be isolated from the team that made it possible. The Bulls in 1998 were not a solo act. Scottie Pippen, limited that night by a painful back, was a connective tissue who drew defensive focus and open lanes. Ron Harper, Tony Kukoc, and Steve Kerr provided spacing and veteran poise. Phil Jackson's system, Zen-infused but ruthlessly practical, asked stars to be stars but also asked those stars to trust the interplay of role players. The Bulls' defensive rotations, the way the bench could catch a rebound and sprint the floor, the willingness of players to accept lower usage roles at crucial moments, all of that made the last shot probable rather than miraculous. Championship moments are social phenomena disguised as individual art. Contrast that with Utah's side of the ledger, and you see the drama that made the finals so electric. Karl Malone, an MVP caliber force that year, fought the late-game physicality, and John Stockton's veteran savvy punctuated the Jazz's pick-and-roll mastery. Jerry Sloan's Jazz were precise, disciplined, and relentless in execution. That opposing excellence makes Jordan's last shot matter more. He was not beating a weak defense. He was beating one of the league's most efficient, finely tuned systems. Champions don't merely win against easy opponents, they beat the very best under the most unforgiving lights. That's what Game 6 represented. Now step into the micro-tactical. Why that particular shot? Jordan could have driven, spun, or attempted a long step-back three. Instead, he chose the 20-footer. Why? Because late clock decisions are about minimizing variance. A mid-range jumper from a practice spot has less variance in contested environments than attempting repeated drives that risk offensive fouls, turnovers, or blocked shots. Jordan's choice was statistically savvy in an era before analytics dominated the vocabulary. He took the highest percentage volume for a player with his repertoire in that moment. A short, quick, controlled jumper that put the contest back on the Jazz. The choice was not merely flair, it was economics. The expected value of that clean look beat the alternatives in that context. It's a lesson many coaches still teach. Late game shots are not always the most spectacular ones, they're the most repeatable ones under stress. Hold for a second and feel how stories live beyond the scoreboard. That jumper didn't just win a game, it sealed chapters. The end of a dynasty for a time, Jordan's then retirement, Phil Jackson's announced exit, and the cementing of pop culture myths that would be retold for decades. Television ratings for that Game 6 reached record heights. Tens of millions watched a single frame and then argued about it for years. The shot, its narrative power, its technical perfection, its controversies, has been replayed, anthologized, and taught. When fans younger than that game ask what ultimate clutch looks like, they point to that 5.2-second jumper and play it as if the image itself could explain what greatness costs. And if you're locked into this moment the way I am, just stay with it. Let the play breathe, the angle of the shoulders, the shift in pressure, the turnover that flips the whole rhythm of a game. If this breakdown pulled you in, hit like and subscribe so you're here for the next chapter of the story. There's an ethical piece to tell too. Greatness is messy. Jordan's career contains triumphs and conflicts, public adoration and private controversies. The Last Dance narrative later complicated and humanized him further. Fans were offered both adulation and complexity. When you tell a champion story, you do justice by including both the halo and the shadow. It makes the moment truer, not smaller. In Game 6, The light and the dark braided into a single human broadcast, a man attempting to solve a problem under pressure and succeeding, imperfectly and completely. Start on the moment itself, the shot in slow motion, the ball leaving Jordan's hands, the rim waiting for it. Let the play unfold backward, Malone holding the ball, the steal, Pippen limping into position. In just a few beats, you feel the choices he made, the space his footwork carved, and how the team around him amplified that brilliance. That's the kind of rhythm that pulls you in, keeps you leaning forward and makes every frame worth watching again. Let's compare. Put Jordan's final shot against other championship-clinching moments. Ray Allen's 2013 three to force Game 7, Derek Fisher's 0.4 second miracle in 2004, Kawhi's 2019 Game 7 buzzer beater in Toronto. Each occupies a different technical family. Ray Allen's 3 is improvisation meeting perfect spacing on a scramble. Fisher's 0.4 is choreography in a microsecond. Kawhi's was a high arc 2-bounce miracle. Jordan's 1998 jumper sits in the class of decisive low variance finishes by a player imposing their will. Compare the physiology. Jordan's move relied on balance and a practiced 15-foot rhythm. Ray Allen's shot required perfect catch-and-shoot chemistry from the corner. Fisher's shot required inbound execution and immediate release. These contrasts help viewers feel the variety of championship-winning moments. They're all legendary, but they arrive from different crafts. One more look at the mechanics reveals why the legend feels effortless. You can almost see it in 3 layers. The micro crossover into the mid-range, the lightning quick release even under contact, and the routines that make clutch shots feel routine. That's what turns myth into method. The moments that coaches notice, that fans try to decode, and that make every replay worth studying. And if you're trying it yourself, drop a comment. I want to hear which move stuck with you. Finish where we began, the frame itself. Jordan's shot with 5.2 seconds left is a single line of evidence about a much larger argument, that champions do small things perfectly when the world narrows. It's a reminder that history is often written in tiny margins, a fingertip on Malone's ball, a micro step away from a defender, a wrist flick timed with practiced instinct. If you watch the play again and again, you'll see the same human truth. Greatness is not only the burst of a single instant, it's the patient accumulation of habits that make that instant inevitable. So rewind the tape, freeze the release, watch the shoulders, the foot plant, the arc, and then imagine all the mornings and late nights that made that arc possible. That is the anatomy of a champion's last shot. That is why when people try to explain the shape of legacy, they often begin at 5.2 seconds and work backward, because that second contains everything that came before and everything that followed.